Hello, I'm Sheila. Thank you so much for inviting me, John, and for having me to this event. Not my premier. I'm going to be speaking about our new premier, Doug Ford, and also the organization I'm representing, TTC Riders. I was sent 4 questions to respond to, so I'll kind of structure my comments around them and tell you what they were. But first I'll say that TTC Riders is a grassroots organization of transit riders, and we campaign for more TTC funding from all levels of government so that we can have better service all across the city and lower fares. And some of our recent wins in the last year have been the introduction of the 2-hour fare on Presto. We've seen the funding of a first phase of a low-income transit pass, and we're fighting to get the next phases funded. So the first phase, for anybody who doesn't know, if you receive OW and ODSP, you're eligible for a discount on the TTC, $2 fares and $115 passes. And then the next phases will be for people who receive childcare subsidies and housing subsidies, and then all other low-income people. So that's very exciting, and we're going to be pushing for those phases to be funded in the next year. And then another win, you may have seen the TTC's new express bus posters up around town. That was our victory and our allies and transit riders who fought for more funding to address overcrowding in this past year's TTC budget. So the first question that I was asked was, how would you describe your activism and what media tools and strategies have you found to be most effective? So I wanted to talk, I just wanted to show some fabulous images and show you some slides of some of the tactics that TTC Riders employs. Our strategy, as I mentioned, we campaign for more funding, so our strategy is to target city councillors and the province, but we employ a variety of creative tactics. And we also do a lot of direct outreach at transit stops and hold rallies, but we like to make events fun and playful and welcoming, and really media friendly to the mainstream media, because it's an effective way to advance our campaign goals. It speaks to the decision makers that need to hear our demands and shows the faces of the transit riders who are part of our movement. So I'm going to flip through some images to start. This is our Ride for Respect that we did in the subway last fall, where we rode from Queen's Park to City Hall. This was a social media campaign called So Efficient It Hurts, when the mayor said that he would find efficiencies in the TTC. He didn't need to raise property taxes to properly fund it. So we did a social media campaign and did a call for submissions from people about how they would make the TTC even more efficient than it already is. This is our Sardine Award that we gave to former Environment Minister Glenn Murray. And we brought the media along with us. We said, we're going to give a prize to we're going to give a Sardine Award, and then rode a TTC streetcar with the media to deliver it. Last winter, we did an overcrowding relief kit distribution center at Yonge Bloor Station, very shortly before the massive shutdown at Bloor Yonge Station, and we created an overcrowding relief kit in this style, but it was just on paper. Gave people a crossword to do to pass the time, handed out breath mints, and then step-by-step instructions to bring overcrowding relief. And at top of the list was to call the premier. We did a race to the bottom where, again, to fight TTC cuts, to see who could, there was a race between John Tory and Kathleen Wynne to see who could fund the TTC the least. And we have a bunch of awesome racers. And then this was our Woes on the Bus campaign. So we combined like a media campaign with direct outreach at transit stops, where we got people to write their TTC complaints on sad faces, their woes. And then we cut them out and we put the woes on the bus. And we drove it to City Hall to deliver it in advance of the city budget. So these are photos from the Toronto.com newspaper. I wonder if I have other, and then this was one of my favorites, our sardine ride that we did, where we made sardine cutouts where people could pose and take photos of themselves, but rode on the TTC. Yeah, so I know people are going to be breaking out later to do kind of skills-based stuff, so I just wanted to share some of my top tips for getting media to your events and what they like. We all know media needs to sell ad space, so they constantly need content. And we've been quite successful in being the go-to organization for mainstream media We have a whole host of speakers and transit riders that can be spokespeople for our movement. But media really likes conflict. So the King Street pilot really generated a lot of media attention when the middle finger ice sculptures went up. They like firsts, so reports, events, so doing rallies, pop appeal, and really great visuals. So the sardine ride and our overcrowding relief kit were really effective. But yeah, I think that answers our question. But in terms of other strategies, I mean, our organization engages with the media, but our ultimate goal is to build the grassroots power of transit riders. And power concedes nothing without demands. So we organize around a set of demands and train and build the capacity of transit riders all across the city to engage in our campaigns. Yeah. And then the other question that I was asked to respond to is, how has the new government changed the activist work you do, and what are the specific and concrete ways we can fight back against the Ford government and its attacks on democracy and education? So I'm going to speak first about some of the issues that are under attack in the new government, and then also some of the ways that we organize and how they're changing. So first, Doug Ford has his sights on the TTC. He ran on a campaign to upload the subway, break it apart, and take over control of the subway system. And we're very concerned about this for a few reasons. One, we think it's sort of Hydro 1 all over again, where could be a first step to privatize transit, sell off the subway lines, just like Hydro 1 was sold off. But we also know that Metrolinx, the provincial transit agency, has a plan to charge us more to ride fast transit. So even if privatization doesn't happen, we know Metrolinx wants to charge us more to ride the subway. And that's, I think what will happen when we see it take over the TTC. And then the second issue is that the provincial funding is set to double to municipalities all across Ontario over the next 4 years, and we're worried that that's at risk. So on those two issues, our strategy is to build the capacity and power of grassroots transit riders and organizations in the key ridings where MPPs are vulnerable and when there's PC MPPs to try to move them. So we're going to be doing subway upload day of action, flyering in those key ridings, a grassroots postering campaign, meetings with MPPs in those key areas where we can move those new MPPs. But I think the other way that the Premier has affected our work is that he's using shock and awe tactics. And it's very easy to be overwhelmed because the attacks just keep coming. Like the two issues I mentioned haven't even happened yet, the transit funding and the subway upload. But he's already announced the subway upload. So people feel like it's a done deal and that they can't do anything about it. And we saw the same thing with the Bill 148. It was announced before any legislation was introduced, and it has a demobilizing effect. People feel like, oh, well, that's done. The $15 minimum wage is canceled, but it has not been canceled yet. And I think that we can really learn from the Fight for 15 and Fairness, who have been keeping the momentum up. They're not stopping, they're growing, and Doug Ford is scared of them. That they're a movement that is really making themselves heard. And Doug Ford has moved on things. He moved on the Green Belt. He's moved on overdose prevention sites. So it's not a time to despair. The next question I was asked about is, what can we do? And my answer is always join an organization. That I think that there's incredible organizations in Toronto and Ontario that have momentum, that welcome new members, and that are fighting to win and have a lot of momentum behind them right now. And then the last question was, what advice do you have for people who want to do something but don't know where to begin? And I would just say, again, to join an organization, because power is organized people and organized money, and we have people. So find out, ask yourself, what am I directly affected by? What is my experience? What are my skills? And look around for an organization that matches that excites you, and that you see building community and connection, and that you want to contribute to. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. And in fact, I was someone from Ryerson in the news, whatever that thing is. That article is going to be posted again tomorrow in the Ryerson in the news, if you would like to read it on a Ryerson website. Anyway, thank you so much for that introduction. So there's that, and then there's this. So what I do, in a nutshell, beyond that, I really believe I try to take histories and I try to make them present. So I'm not a historian, even though I do histories. I hate, if anyone's a historian, I'm sorry, but I hate historians because they often stay too much in the past, and then you in the present can't connect it, so you feel so disengaged from it. And so what I try to do is connect the past to the present. And so, having said that about historians, I'm also not really an activist. At least I think I'm not. What I do is that so to the first question is like, same idea, I was given questions, right, to respond. So in terms of my own activism, is that it really is about the writing that I do. It's about the things that I choose to embroil myself in through the words and the access that I have as an academic. And so for me, what I see myself is engaging in what I would call an intellectual activism. And I think there's writing to be published, and then there's writing to actually move people to be affected and to do something. And I just believe that you can't really do anything if you don't have history behind you. Context, to place certain discussions in the present in their proper sort of continuum. So as I was putting this talk together, I also realized that one of the things that I do, even in my work and my teaching, is that I'm all about semantics. You know when people say, oh, that's semantics. Yes, you actually need to start paying attention to semantics, because in the 21st century, that's the nuance of racism, classism, sexism, all the isms. It's through semantics in the media that they're being employed. It's not a direct, someone's not gonna call you the N-word. They're just gonna say you're a thug, right? They're not gonna say that these are poor people. They're gonna call them a mob or something else. So it's semantics that all of these things get mobilized. So if you don't have the, to borrow from Stuart Hall, if you don't know how to decode the encoding, then you are really lost. Right? You're really not living in the 21st century. You're trying to take 20th century skills and decode 21st century issues. And in my opinion, that's what we need to do when we're dealing with the media. So I'll get to that. So as I was putting this talk together, I stumbled upon this passage or this article from The Nation from 2001. It was called Naming and Unnaming Names. So this article was written by Eric Scagliano in 2001, December. So just a few months after 9/11. So I just want to read this quote from The Nation in response to what happened. So he writes, 2 months after the September 11 attacks, the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, ACTA, an academic watchdog group founded by Lynn Cheney, issued a report grandly titled, quote, Defending Civilization. And I'll stop there because just a few days ago or last week on campus, there was a poster that said students for something to defend civilization. It was like students in defense of civilization. That was just at Mutual and Dundas on campus, and it was a white man, a white face that said, they're calling us all this, we need to defend civilization. So I just thought that was a weird parallel. So it said, Defending Civilization, How Our Universities Are Failing America and What Can Be Done About It. Its authors proclaimed that, quote, while citizens have rallied behind the president wholeheartedly, college and university faculty have been the weak link in America's response. They painted academe as a pacifist fifth column, undermining the war effort through evocation, moral relativism, and outright opposition, noting, quote, some professors even pointed accusatory fingers not at the terrorists, but at America itself. And they named names. Academics who supposedly pointed such fingers and uttered such equivocations in 117 instances collected from media sources. They also announced that they would send the list to 3,000 trustees at colleges across the country. And when I read that, I just thought that was 2001. And here we are in 2018, and I think it's kind of the same context. However, oddly enough, I was saying this to a student today. In 2001, this was a response to an international or a foreign issue, right? The foreign had come onto domestic land and had done something terrible, and America was responding. Today, in the US, like we have in Ontario, it is actually the king imploding into the castle, right? Like there isn't this exterior force causing all of these issues. It is the castle itself causing the issues, right? So that was, I just thought, one interesting parallel to think about. And so then we go on and we think about, you know, when I was putting this together, I thought, obviously everyone is aware of the free speech, is he calling it a bill or a policy? Whatever he's calling it, right? That's about trying to essentially thwart protest on university campuses and any discussions that would be deemed maybe politically correct. And when I heard this discussion that it's been covered in the media and the way they've talked about it, to me, I link it back to theories that I teach in my classes when I talk about race and racism. And the first two is that what we're witnessing in terms of how the media discusses the other, and the other in this case could be race, ethnicity, gender, body, it really doesn't matter, is the new racism and what's known as democratic racism. And so I just want to spend a few minutes explaining what those actually are and what they look like. And so the new racism is really dated back to the 1980s. A lot of people talk about a scholar by the name of Martin Barker, who was using it to describe what he called a highly sophisticated and disguised form of racism that appears through semantic manipulations. And so using words like, especially a perfect example of this is the way Colin Kaepernick has been framed. So calling him a thug or calling him unpatriotic or calling him, in some instances, people who support him, a mob, all of those things. It's the way that non-normative bodies are framed through the language, through this language to essentially other them as the problem. Even Black feminist scholar Patricia Hill Collins, who wrote a book in 2004 called Black Sexual Politics, she talks about how this new strain of racism is pervasive, but it's harder to recognize. You really can't just call it out. It's very difficult, right? But where you can locate it is in popular culture and in the use of, again, language, of national pride or love of country or loyalty or patriotism. So all of the use of all of those words are a way to create this us versus them. That there's, in the case of the US, there's an America that represents an America, then there's problems that we need to get rid of. In the case of Ontario, there's good, hardworking workers, right? Whoever those people are. Then there's everybody else who obviously lives in the city of Toronto, who are leftists and who don't share the vision of the person who's leading us. And so one of the things that they say about this use of language is that if you don't know how to read it, you really don't know how to respond to it. Like if you just take everything as nothing because they didn't call someone the N-word or they didn't say something that was overtly sexist, then you're actually not responding to it, right? Because you're looking for an old form of racism that often doesn't exist in the context of media. And so I also thought about the way my former university, U of T, sort of has responded to a lot of this discussion about free speech. And in fact, in September, University of Toronto President Merrick Gertler, I believe his name is, said, quote, "Our principles have served us well and we must continue to guide our practices. And these principles must continue to guide our practices. It's important that members of our community understand the university's policies and how we address these issues." So again, a statement like that, I don't even know what he's talking, like, can we just deal, like, right? It's like legalese. It's like, can you just say what you really mean? But then he goes on to say, we have a responsibility as a university community to ensure that debates and discussions take place in an environment of mutual respect and free of hate speech, physical violence, or other actions that may violate the laws of the land, right? Then he goes on, then in that same article, it was on the Varsity, they went on to talk about that there's a student group at U of T called Students in Support of Free Speech that are basically cherry picking what they consider to be free speech and speech that they need to shut down. And so that is an example of what's known as democratic racism, where we defend the egalitarian principles of democracy At the same time, we allow those same groups that are defending those principles to essentially marginalize and silence other people who don't seem to fit these principles that we feel like we need to defend and maintain. And I think about that a lot in the context of U of T, because I used to teach in the Canadian Studies program. And this is not a hate on U of T, but it's just facts. So if you know someone at U of T, you can take it there. Because I used to teach in the Canadian Studies program, and I taught a course that I developed called Black Canadian Studies for 4 years that consistently had the same enrollment as every other course in Canadian Studies. Canadian Studies is supposed to be small, under 20 classes, under the class of the size of the class is typically under 20. And yet, the moment I've left, they have taken that course off the calendar. So that course is now no longer offered because they say it's not essential to Canadian Studies. And so it's things like that that make you wonder if this is a school or universities are trying to build inclusivity. When they do things like that, it seems to go against the principles that they claim to be maintaining. And I want you to think about now that in the broader sense of Canadian media. And that leads me to the next question that I was asked to respond to is, how has the new government affected the activist work that I think I do? So one of the reasons why I'm here is that back in April, I wrote an article for Spacing, where I'm a contributor, that basically called out Doug Ford for his white savior complex that I think he does have. And that was the article that I wrote in April, and then they saw it and they said, oh, you should come and talk. And so in that article, I explained that a white savior complex is this belief that non-white people need to be saved because they are unable or incapable of saving themselves or helping themselves. And so Doug Ford, even before he was elected, for the last 10 years, himself and his brother, now deceased, they articulated this paternalistic savior view of Black community, and in my opinion, all racialized communities. In fact, he even celebrated the fact that he would hand out money to the poor, right? And he would take Black kids up to the cottage, because Black kids from the Caribbean never dipped their toes in water before. Let's think about that. That's basically what he was saying. They'd never dipped their toes in water, so let me take them up to my cottage. And then he uses words like them to describe entire communities of people and all the people that he's helped. And so one of the things I did a few months later is that I wrote another article for Spacing, and I know it sounds like I'm promoting Spacing, but I mean, you know, it is what it is. But I wrote another article where I talked about an artist from the Jane and Finch community who had an exhibit at Black Artists Network and Dialogue. It's called BAND. So they have a gallery in like Queen West. Thank you. And she had an exhibit that was basically trying to display a different point of view on what Black community looks like in Jane and Finch. And at the same time, you had former city councilor Giorgio Mamalotti making all these anti-Black statements about Jane and Finch that is getting all the media attention. And yet, how many of you heard of Janice Reid's exhibit at BAND? How many of you heard of Giorgio Mamalotti, whatever his name is, calling Jane and Finch, saying they need to get clear of the cockroaches, right? So it really is about what the media chooses to focus on. And like you, I think, eloquently said, they love conflict, right? And unfortunately, as it relates to especially Black people in Toronto, that conflict is always through the lens of victim, savior, right? And so what I want to do now is show you what the community did to ensure that Giorgio Mamalotti would not be reelected, and he wasn't. And I really believe that this campaign that community members in Jane and Finch did, I really think it had an impact, because at his defeat speech, he genuinely seemed shocked. Like he never saw it coming. And so they were able to mobilize and put something together that I think probably had an impact. So I will show you. It's a group, I should say, it's a group called Flaunted. It's a youth-led organization based in Jane and Finch, and they use photography to promote positive self-images of young, racialized people who live in the community. And so they created this video in response to his cockroach comments. Do we have volume? Yeah.
Spraying down a building full of cockroaches. The cockroaches are just going to scatter. It's no wonder our little kids in those communities are growing up angry and killing people. I want to knock down all of the social housing in Jane and Finch. So start evicting them.
Yes.
Let them scatter. The cockroaches are just going to scatter. Growing up angry and killing people. The cockroaches are just going to scatter. Communities are growing up angry and killing the cockroaches. Growing up angry and killing people. The cockroaches growing up angry and growing up angry and growing up angry and cockroaches people. Killing people. Killing people.
Hi, my name is Sam.
My name is Nathan.
My name is Serena. I'm the executive director of a youth-led organization that works to empower women.
I'm a longtime Jane and Finch resident.
I am a dancer, teacher, rapper,
Community worker,
and a spoken word poet.
and PhD candidate.
And I aspire to save the world through words.
But apparently,
But apparently I'm a cockroach.
I'm a cockroach.
I'm a cockroach.
Hi, my name is Malik.
Hi, my name is Rachel.
Hi, my name is Abdul.
I'm currently aspiring to be a registered kinesiologist.
I'm aspiring to become a civil engineer.
I'm aspiring to be a paramedic.
But apparently, I'm an angry kid growing up to kill people.
I'm just an angry kid who likes to kill people.
I'm an angry kid growing up to kill people.
But apparently I'm an angry kid who likes to kill people.
But apparently, I'm a cockroach.
My name is Kwaku. I'm a fashion designer, and apparently I'm an angry kid who kills people.
University, but apparently, I'm just a cockroach. Hi, my name is Jasmine, and I'm a photographer and film student in high school. But apparently, I'm growing up to kill people.
Hi, my name is Darren, and I want to be a teacher in the Jane and Finch community. But apparently, I'm a cockroach.
Yeah, anyway, you can clap if you.
It says all together in a community like Jane and Finch.
And we can stop it there because that's exactly what they did, right? So they used their voices to not only, I don't know why I'm getting all teared up with that last one when he's like the fashion, just got me. Anyway, but you can see that they're using their voices and they're not allowing the narrative to be written through the media and through politicians, right? I'm not from Jane and Finch community. I'll tell you the truth. I've been there twice in my entire life. And yet the way that space has been mapped as black space is so problematic because that Jane and Finch community is actually a reflection of multiculturalism. As you can see in the video, it is extremely diverse. It is not only a black community. And so that narrative has really taken over. How much time? Like 1 minute? Okay, so to the last question, advice for people who want to do something. I'm reminded of Sophia Umoja Noble. She wrote a book in 2018 called Algorithms of Oppression: How Search Engines Reinforce Racism. And she talks about the power of algorithms in the age of neoliberalism. And that power lays in the way that digital decisions reinforce oppressive social relationships and enact new models of racial profiling. So she's actually coined the term technological redlining. And that is actually what happens as you engage in every Google search and every algorithm on the internet. So what I really believe the next wave, if we really want to think of activism, is that we really have to think more about the internet and creating a critical discourse in Canada around new media. A lot of people do new media work, and I'm shocked that they never mention racism or classism or sexism, and yet they consider themselves to be a new media scholar. To me, that's extremely problematic because the internet is a neo-site of colonialism in every sense of the word, and it has reproduced certain power dynamics. We don't have time to get into it, but if you even think of why the internet is almost, 90% in English, that in itself is an oppressive force, depending on where you live. And so to the last point of how can we care for ourselves, might sound hokey, but you really should practice meditation. I'm telling you the truth, this changed my life in the last year. Just to get still and to refocus of who are you, why are you doing this, what do you want to achieve? It sounds corny, but a lot of people are always working through that top level emotion, and emotion is wonderful if you have a cause, but you're gonna burn out, and we've seen that happen with Black Lives Matter Toronto. Where are they today? And now look, police are going right back to Pride after a few years of all the great protesting. Because you need to have a plan. And you don't really get a plan until you get centered and you know why it is that you're doing what you're doing. And the second thing is that you really need to use those feelings of the negative and positive feelings that you might have constructively. You know, I mean, I'm an academic, so all I can do is talk. I like a soapbox. But that doesn't mean that I still can't impart that knowledge onto people who want to go out there and do the work that they need to do. So I actually believe academics and frontline activists should really be doing a lot more together than just having casual conversations at cafes about the work that needs to be done. And I'll leave you with this. I absolutely love this quote. So it's from Frantz Fanon, from Black Skins, White Mass from 1967. And it's a quote that most people never read of his, but I just think it was perfect. So this is a quote. He says, "There are too many idiots in this world. And having said it, I have the burden of proving it." And I actually believe that's what activism is really trying to do and bring light to. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me here. I think I'm going to speak from the body as much as I can. So the first thing that comes right now is a bunch of thank yous to all the people who have recently been around in my life and helped doing the little action I've managed somehow. And one of those people is just down back there. And he's Trevor, and I would like to really thank him. Then I'm gonna say this is a dear drawing from a friend whom I still love, but over the course of kind of switching from art to activism, I lost. We still love each other, but we can't talk anymore. I think that like the 10 minutes I have right now are going to be used to try to journey from the personal to the systemic, and try to show you that as a person who lives with a more or less invisible disability, my way of doing activism after kind of like realizing that my art was a failure, not in the sense that the performances were not appreciated at all, on the opposite, but I had hopes, and they were placed at the wrong place. So in the end, I realized that my concepts were pure failures. There was never any systemic change that came out of any of the performances I did around gender identity or equality. It was beautiful to see the audience, people would interact, get involved, praise, or whatever good work it was. But as soon as it was out of the door, even in this one where people actually voted and promised something, nothing happened. Why? Because most of the times the container of art is so constructed that art looks at itself, right? It's just like the documentation right now might do to us, right? Tomorrow, instead of doing something, we might go look at this documentation. And this is where part of our energy is going to go. So tomorrow, think about that. So art right now is in brackets, but I'll try to convey to you that I'm still using the artistic ethics that I've built over those years of being a performance artist. It drives my ethics in every corner, in every interaction with whomever living with a disability or with poverty I encounter. Then there was, like before I go into talking more about the current action, which is called minimal action, which led me to Queen's Park this afternoon. I show you my dearest objects. Syringe and delatestrel, testosterone in sesame oil, bicycle parts, touch, sound. This is what I like to do, like instead of being here and trying to convince us that maybe we should find, I don't know what, me included, right, to contest this premiere we have. I'd like to build bicycle wheels, have the sound resonate in the spokes. So touch is very important, and touch has been the anchor point that led me through a deep crisis last summer. The only way I felt I was still existing was to touch my pinky fingers and just stay still and wait until I could feel I'm here again. And I would do this while somebody would call me and check if I was still alive. So again, I go back to the body. Tonight I'm here as a person living with a disability on ODSP. I have part-time jobs that I lose every 6 months because either I'm not productive enough, like I'm not exactly stupid. I've had other lives in academia in the past. But I still lose my jobs, or I get part-time like contracts. Part-time is perfect, but temporary is not very good. My allowance is a maximum of $1,169, and my rent is $800. So I don't know where your finances are. I can live with this, but if you add like the threatening atmosphere of this government right now, I go half crazy. So tonight I carry with me, and I again thank Trevor to be here, because I know that we know of stories inside of the ODSP Action Coalition and more for other disabled people of like a huge amount of anxiety. So I come back to touch. Touch has been the point of anchor in this world, and touch is kind of the maximum care for me. So when I had to design what am I gonna fucking do after art has failed, but I can't sustain just like looking at Doug Ford, what am I gonna do? Especially after July 31st, when the Minister of Social Sciences announced a bunch of cuts and new policies, and also her 100 days reviews of the current social assistance system, a review that will come to an end on November 8th with an official announcement. Of course, you can imagine that we are very scared, because she said it's going to be the best social program, which is a job. So you can imagine all the people living with disabilities who can't work, very happy, right? Me included, because if they send me to a psychiatrist to do fitness assessments to see whether I can work, how am I going to show them what I am when I can't? Sorry, I divert all the time. Huh? Touch, back to touch. So if touch is the maximum care, how am I going to be able to do something through touch? And it's going to sound very weird, because it led me to do... Oh, is it in Google or in... Here. It led me to do minimal action. And I call minimal action something that is the maximum I can do with the maximum care. And it's also minimal because it's connected to touch. So the last part of minimal action, I can go back to the other ones. The last part was a call for people to write letters to the MPPs. So when you write a letter, you write words, you type on the paper, and you expect this MPP to read or touch the paper. I experienced this very strangely this afternoon because I went to Queen's Park. You get this little number from the security office, and then every corner you go and say, where are you going? Are you alone? No, are you with a group? Yeah, they look for visitors. And I said, I'm alone. And I guess I don't look like I'm supposed to be there, so it was, anyway, so that was. So I went to Queen's Park to deliver a pile of contributions from other people living with disability and poverty. That's the pile with a little notebook I created expressively for the MPP I was going to give this to. The MPP was NDP critic for social services, Lisa Gretzky. So I gave this to her. I said, I'm here as a body with lived experience. I don't want to say too much. She said that she had just asked a question about consultation in the morning and that Minister MacLeod has just like not replied at all. So she was going to ask another one at 6 to 9. So consultation of people with lived experience has become a surface issue. And that was the issue that brought me to start this Minimal Action 3. But Minimal Action 3 was a continuation of, we can't go to Minimal Action 2. Minimal Action 2. And Minimal Action 2 started when Andrea Hatala from the coalition, ODSP Action Coalition, and I went into Marit Stiles' office. And we started to voice the fact that we were wondering where the consultations were, and Marit Stiles said, well, it doesn't seem to be any. So she suggested that she would stand up and say our words at Queen's Park. So this was the trigger for Minimal Action, to have words on paper that she could read at Queen's Park. So today, and then Minimal Action became bigger because the School of Disability Studies here became involved, right? 5 more. Yeah. So I went this afternoon with my pile of Minimal Action 2 and 3, and I gave this pile, and it went quite well, but if I tell you the body sensation right now, so, you know, like, going to her was trying to touch the systemic, right? She has a certain amount of power because she's the first responder to the minister around social services. So, like, she didn't even touch the papers herself. It was her assistant. So I realized that when I was on my bicycle going home, I started to not trust that she would read those papers. And the only reason why I would not trust is because she didn't touch them. So next time, I will make sure that this person touches what I bring. I don't know whether it makes any sense. Maybe it doesn't, eh?
It makes sense.
Makes sense, eh? So touch. Is touch also a certain form of care for you?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So maybe, you know, we heard meditation before. Yeah? Meditation is a certain form of touch, eh? Because you stay at a certain embracing or distance or relationship with your sensations, and you let them happen. Until you can't anymore, of course. It might be a fraction of a second, right? Should we read one contribution and then we stop here?
Yeah.
Yeah? You want to choose which one?
Melissa Flick, Anonymous 2, Raina Slobagian, Workman Arts Postcard Project, Claude Wittmann, Chris Ablett, Sammy Doe Johnson, ODSP Action Coalition Scarborough, KA, Christina Murphy, Anonymous 4, Lena Rodby. Which one would we like to see?
I'll just put it out there. I always like Anonymous.
Anonymous 4.
Anonymous 4. Anonymous 4.
Sure.
Anonymous 4. Was sent on October 29. To whom it... Oh, maybe somebody else should read. Please. Somebody else in the audience could read.
I'll read it.
You read. Thank you.
To whom it may concern, I have been on ODSP since early 90s due to chronic pain and depression from serious motor vehicle accident. The Conservatives at that time said they were going to fix social services and created OW and ODSP. They also cut OW by, OW is what used to be called welfare, right?
Yes.
Yeah, now it's Ontario Works.
Ontario Works, by 21.6% and accidentally cut disability by the same amount. No one has fixed this or addressed the discrepancy since. I began a relationship with my nurse immediately following my accident, and after 3 months, ODSP deemed us common-law spouses and began clawing back 50% of her earnings off my ODSP check. They've been doing that to us for 28 years. My wife is a nurse who earns a decent living. Why on earth should she be forced to financially support me because I was on ODSP? They have clawed back over $100,000 from my wife over this time period and giving me a huge overpayment to boot. This is a huge source of conflict between us, each inevitably blaming the other for the clawbacks. Thankfully, she has stuck by me, but ODSP made my spouse become poor solely for being in a relationship and having children with me, an ODSP recipient. Our home is falling apart. We are $20,000 behind in property taxes, and our roof is in dire need of repair. High hydro bills take every penny that's left because our home is all electric heat. We are constantly arguing over money and on the verge of throwing in the towel. ODSP has been cut to ribbons. The removal of the Community Startup Fund and others have trapped disabled and their children in abusive relationships with no way out. The amount paid to people is ridiculous when you adjust for cost of living. Food bank use is through the roof. I'm shaking and afraid of what's coming up next. We are on the verge of divorce and financial collapse now. For the first time since my accident, I am contemplating suicide to give my wife and children a decent, affordable life without me. My death will be on Ford Nation and Ontario Social Services' hands, but they won't care.
Mm-hmm. That's it. That's the end. Yeah. I will just add one word. The word suicide here might be desensitizing to some reader. If you read other contributions, you're going to see that more than 60 or 70% of all the contributions you see there mention that word. And I say it too. If you read my opinion in the Now magazine on September 20 or my letter, I definitely would like to have unconditional access to assisted suicide. I'd like to know what the machinery would be that I could touch and press if the stress is too hard, before losing my mind or being internalized at come age. And this is just the knowledge from the body. I'm not trying to create the savior complex in you, right? Don't go there. Don't go there. I need to participate, or we need to participate all together in creating that world, but I don't need your savior complex. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. I'm very, very happy and pleased to be here, and yes, thank you. Another thing that wasn't mentioned in that introduction is that I am also a part of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Project. I'm a recipient of basic income. Just to do a quick recap so that we're all on the same page, what is the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Project? During Kathleen Wynne's Liberal government, they launched a study where they chose 4,000 people in 4 cities of Hamilton, Thunder Bay, Brantford, and Lindsay to receive an unconditional basic income. And that amount, it was geared towards people who are low income. So the qualifying factor was if you were making under $30,000 a year, and you could receive up to $1,400 a month if you were single. And if you were working, then that amount would be subtracted by 50 cents to the dollar. So I was working while receiving basic income, so I received about $700 a month. It was meant to be a 3-year study, and there were 2 control groups. There were people who were on basic income and people who weren't on basic income, and they would both be able to fill out surveys describing what their life is like on basic income or not. So I remember I applied for this in December of 2017, and I found out I got approved in February of 2018. And one of the very first thoughts I had was, my rent is covered. Oh my God, my rent is covered. Holy shit, my rent is covered. Like, it was just the hugest weight had been lifted off of my shoulders. And that was because at that point in time, I was working 4 jobs. In the morning, I would get up bright and early. I would walk dogs all morning into the afternoon. And then in the evening, I would teach piano all evening and into the night. I never had time to go home and make myself dinner. And in between those 2 jobs, I was still working so hard to try and build my photography business and also working for Photographers Without Borders. So when I was able to do that, I was able to drop down, quit teaching piano, quit walking dogs, and focus all my energy into the pursuits that I really wanted to pursue. And then Doug Ford's government came in, and they had gone on the record during their election multiple times and stated and made election promises saying that they weren't going to cancel the basic income pilot. So hell hath no fury like a photographer scorned. The source of my fury was multifold. At the core, I was furious because I just had a rich white man steal a whole bunch of money from me. And not only that, he broke the election promise. And I was also furious because it wasn't just me. I'm one of the lucky ones, but there are 3,999 low-income people, and they're going to suffer. And how they've treated us is deplorable. So when they made the announcement on July 31st, and they only announced it to the media, and all they said is, we are going to cancel the basic income pilot. No information about when they were going to cancel it or what that would look like. So for the entire month of August, all of us were terrified, thinking, are we going to get this payment that we have been counting on and have planned our lives around? Finally, a month later, they said that they would cancel the pilot in March, and that would be the last payment. But again, no direct communication to any of the basic income recipients whatsoever. Nobody got any letters in the mail from the government until mid-October. That's 2.5 months of silence from the government. And they were unable to provide any reason based on any fact or evidence whatsoever as to why they canceled it. And this was a world issue. This is a study that's being viewed on the world stage, and the data is valuable in a world conversation about basic income. There are pilots of basic income taking place all over the world, and economists that were watching this study. And it would have provided very concrete answers and furthered on the conversation about what the future of economics looks like in our world right now. So I was furious. And I realized if I had to react, I had to react fast. So I immediately, the next day, I started contacting people, reaching out on social media, and this portrait series called Humans of Basic Income was born. So what I started doing is I started finding people through social media, through Facebook, finding people who were recipients of basic income, and I wanted to know, well, what were you using the money for, and can you tell me? So I went to Queen's Park, and I had pieces of Bristol board that I'd ripped up, and I had a package of Sharpies, and I got people to write some of the signs. So I imagine some of you will want to see some of the photos, so I brought some with me. This is Tim. He is Very talkative, but he has been with me from the beginning. Basic income helps me stay healthy with good food. I am ill. The effects of poverty are more than being poor. Basic income helps our family with the atrocious costs that come with hospital parking. Hashtag more important than a beer. Basic income alleviated my stress when my income wasn't enough each month. I am precariously employed. I am a full-time student and a beginning manual therapist in my community. This one was very sad. Basic income means I can pay my guide dog's medical bills. ODSP does not have a drug plan for service animals. $250 a month for meds, never mind vet costs. The option was to give her back and the school would adopt her out. Basic income has allowed me to keep her in my independence. That's not her pet, that's her guide dog. That's her tool for accessibility, and she will lose it when basic income is canceled. Basic income is the income used to qualify me for housing subsidy. It feeds my children with special needs while I'm being dragged along through a broken family court system, seeking disclosure for child support and getting poorer. And I'm waiting for FRO to proactively enforce a previous child support order from a father who has never paid child support, who is now over $35,000 in arrears. So, as you can see, there are very serious situations and very serious subjects in this portrait series. And so I was able to I started in Hamilton, I started in my own city, but then I realized as I was going that I need to get to other cities in order for it to be effective. I need to get to Brantford, I need to get to Lindsay, I need to get to Thunder Bay. And as I started sharing these on social media, the portrait series took a life of its own. It gained traction on Twitter, on Facebook, and all of a sudden I had people reaching out to me. So people flew me out to Thunder Bay so I could take portraits there. People got me to come to Lindsay so I could take portraits there. So I have achieved portraits in all 4 cities. My goal was 50 portraits. Right now, I'm at 70 portraits, and I'm not stopping, and I'm still having people approach me, and I'm still taking portraits. These portraits have been exhibited in Hamilton at Supercrawl. They were in Toronto. They're currently in Kingston at Queen's University, and my next goal is to get them into Queen's Park, and I have MPPs and politicians working with me right now to make that happen. There's a GoFundMe that's been going on. I've been interviewed by CBC, Toronto Star, the Huffington Post. My life got a little weird, basically. And this needs to get big. I need this to be seen by everyone. My goal when this first happened is I said, I want Doug Ford to know my name. And I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, Doug Ford knows my name, and he doesn't really like me. But now I want Justin Trudeau to know my name. I want this to be an election issue, and next year with the 2019 election coming up, I want every federal politician talking about this, and it's already begun. Jagmeet Singh has already publicly called out Justin Trudeau and asked him to save the basic income pilot. Elizabeth May, along with Mike Schreiner of the Green Party, have written an open letter to Trudeau asking him to take on the pilot. And this issue is a multi-partisan issue. It needs to extend beyond party lines. And so far I've had people from the Liberal, NDP, and Green parties who have been outspoken in supporting me. And I need them to be united in this and continue to support it. So it's clear that the Conservatives are not going to take us up on the pilot. But we have succeeded in putting a human face to a political issue. And we have prompted a conversation about what it means to work with the most vulnerable in society, and what it means to amplify voices and give people power and give people the chance to tell their stories on a platform where people will listen to them and hear them. We are living in very scary times. I never thought I would see the day where I would live in a world where Donald Trump is the President of the United States and Doug Ford is the Premier of Ontario. But let's be clear, the elements that created Doug Ford did not happen overnight. We were still in recovery from the cuts from the Mike Harris government to social services, the cuts that Claude mentioned in his talk. And now they're going to be cut further. And the Liberal government in the last 20 years, we were still recovering, and they did not do enough to fix OW and ODSP. A big thing I've learned through doing this portrait series and meeting these people is that those social service systems were keeping people in poverty and making it impossible for people to live and get out of it. And what we know, and what I do know for a fact, is that when social services get cut, people die. This is a fact, and I know this, and I know that people I know now might die, and I'm terrified. We live in dangerous times, and we live in times where views and people's opinions are becoming increasingly polarized. We have the left and the right, and this seems to be increasingly harder and harder to find a middle ground where we can talk in a way that's civil and educated and informed. A lot of times that people who have opposed the work that I am doing or have been in opposition to these stories coming forward, the language I'm encountering are words such as parasite and leech. And like you mentioned in your talk about language that's used to dehumanize and affect violence. I'm seeing this now. I'm getting it. I'm receiving this language. I'm a parasite. I'm a leech to some people. I've had people tell me to kill myself. And they're dehumanizing terms. They are literally saying our value and worth as humans is directly related to how we contribute to the economy. And if we cannot contribute to the economy in a way that they are satisfied with, we aren't human. We're parasites. We're leeching off the taxpayer system. We're lazy. We're entitled. And we see this throughout history, time and time again, people groups, class groups, races, and when that dehumanizing language is used, it opens the door for the justification of violence. And in this case is justifying lazy parasites and violence against them. And if we don't combat that violence, if we don't look it in the face, people will die. And it might not be as overtly violent as a genocide or a Holocaust, but people will die. They will gain long-term health problems that will go untreated because they can't afford good food, or they can't afford safe, clean housing, or they can't afford the medication that they need to survive. They will go to jail because there's a direct link to poverty and crime. They will kill themselves over untreated mental health issues or the stress and hopelessness that comes with the disease that is poverty. I firmly believe that poverty is a disease, and people's lives are at stake. And poverty costs our province $38 billion per year. So be furious with me that a study that cost $150 million and would have given a huge answer to what this cost is and how to combat that will be cut prematurely, ultimately wasting all of that money with no data and no research to show for it while people die in poverty. Mr. Lisa MacLeod has said that she will reform Ontario's social welfare system in 100 days, and day 100 is coming up, and that's November 8th. It is impossible to do that in 100 days. It's simply impossible. The most comprehensive and effective government in the world cannot reform social welfare in 100 days, especially in a place as diverse as Ontario and as large as Ontario. What social welfare looks like in Toronto is different than what it looks like in Hamilton, is different than what it looks like in Thunder Bay, is different than what it looks like in Owen Sound or Ottawapiskat or Pembroke or any of the places that make up our beautiful province. And I know for a fact she's done zero consultations with any of these groups. Like Claude said, zero consultations with any social service groups. And I'm terrified the announcement is going to be more cuts to social services, and they're just calculating what they can cut and where they can cut it. And I don't think my fears are unfounded. And I know what I've just said is terrifying. This is scary, and this is real, and this is the world that we are living in right now. So we need to be brave, and we need to be united. And I haven't been able to do this myself. I have had people who have come along from all walks of life, friends and strangers. People have helped me manage my social media. People have flown me up to Thunder Bay to take portraits. The people here invited me to speak to you and talk to you about the work that I'm doing. And people across all economic landscapes have come forward to help in any way that they can. And it's been a huge process of connecting all of these people across the province, academics, lawyers, activists, politicians, all over, and everyone working together to fight this and fight it strategically and fight it smartly. And so despite all this senseless evil, these ill-thought decisions, and this dehumanizing rhetoric, I've been inspired. I'm encouraged by the goodness of people. People are sharing these portraits and telling the stories. They've been tweeting, they've been responding, they've been donating money and time and skills, and this has been successful to tell the stories. And it made me realize that this is way bigger than just a portrait series, and that the only way we win this is if we stay united and we focus on the cause. So I leave you, I want to ask why you are here. Because I've encountered so many strangers and supporters, and this project could not have happened alone. And I need your help now. I need this project to continue. And I have my camera here. I'm ready for the next phase of my portrait series. So what I'm doing now is I'm targeting people who are not on basic income anymore. Oh, there's another one. The basic income program helped us move to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood and feel financially secure enough to go back to school and get a better job. But now I'm targeting people who aren't on basic income, who support basic income, and asking you why you do. And people of all walks of life and all professions. This is Andrea. She is a coordinator at a community group in Hamilton called the Hamilton Hive. I support basic income because I believe everyone deserves a chance at health, success, and happiness. This is Andrew. He's a doctor. He's a family physician. So in his line of work, he deals with marginalized people all the time, and he sees the detriments of the social systems and the detriments of poverty. I support basic income because I see the negative health effects of poverty every day at work. This is Floyd. Last 2 weeks ago, there were 100 CEOs who penned a letter to the Ontario government putting pressure on them to reinstate the pilot. Floyd is the composer of that letter, and he is a CEO. Basic income will unleash human potential. It will grow the economy and create a society that is more confident, respectful, and self-reliant. This is Mike Schreiner. He's the leader of the Ontario Green Party. I support a basic income guarantee because everyone deserves economic security. Premier Ford, we need solutions and not cuts to reduce income inequality. I have Bristol board here, I have markers, and if you support basic income, then I want you to write why you support it. I want you to tell me why, and I want you to be in my portrait series. I have my camera, I'm ready to go. And we cannot be neutral in times of oppression. Being united means taking action. And I'm asking you to take action. I'm asking you to take a marker, take a piece of cardboard, and tell me your story and let me share it. We're going to change the world. We're making history here. This is how you make history. Thank you.
Thank you. So that ends the panel portion of this first half. However, we do have a few minutes for Q&A. Are there any questions for any of our panelists?
How long was that program for? The basic income?
It was a 3-year program.
3 years? Thank you.
It was started in 2017. It was planned to run to 2020.
Panelists, maybe.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Panelists, would you like to come to the front? Sorry.
And there is an audience mic going around here somewhere that you could ask your questions to the mic for recording posterity.
I'm getting a chair.
If you'd like a chair, yeah.
I mean, since you went last, you want the high,
Oh no!
the high
You
chair.
can have it. I don't care.
You can sit on the low. No, I don't want to sit down at all.
No, I don't want to sit down either. So, yeah.
I don't know. Should we stand over here?
Any questions? Yes.
I was just wondering about the basic income pilot. If you saw in the news today that a judge has granted approval to hear the case, there's a class action lawsuit that is being launched.
I'm aware of that. So that lawyer is a man in Lindsay named Mike Perry. He's working pro bono. So he put the action forward back in August, and it was going to be heard in October. We decided to take more time to do more research to gather a stronger case. So there's two things that's happening. He's requesting that either the pilot be reinstated, and if it doesn't get reinstated, then it will go forward as a lawsuit. There are 4 plaintiffs, and if it is approved as an action, then it will become a class action lawsuit, so anybody on basic income will be invited to be a plaintiff.
Will you be?
Oh, absolutely, I will be a plaintiff. Never wanted to be in a lawsuit, but here I am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And
Actually, for everybody on the panel, if I can,
Yeah,
quick
sure,
question. When you're making comments on social media with public officials, have any of you ever been blocked on social media, on Instagram or Twitter, by a public official?
I don't know. Would we know?
I was going to say, not to my knowledge.
No.
Not yet.
It's easy
No?
to be blocked, and you do know because if you're on Twitter and you're blocked, you'll see a post come up, but then it'll say this post is unavailable to you.
Oh.
And then the.
Okay, I see that a lot then. Now I know. I don't know if it's been public officials, but I know I know for a fact I've been blocked by certain academics and certain people. I actually love when that happens. Yeah.
I don't.
Well, for me, I love when that happens, because that means I said something that your little pea brain can't process, so you have to remove me. So I want to speak to people who want to hear me. And so to me, I've just learned with social media not to take it personally, because it's not like your neighbor slammed the door in your face.
Yeah, but it's different when it's a public official, or let's say if it was Rob.
But how do you know?
Doug
How do you
Ford.
even know it was that public official? Could be their rep,
It
could be
doesn't
a
matter.
bot.
It
You
doesn't
don't
matter.
even, you don't even know.
We're paying taxes, and we shouldn't be censored.
But social media, I don't know, it's a difficult, that's a blurry line for me. Because it's not the same thing as if you went to their office at Queen's Park and they refused to talk to you. On social media, like I said, how do you know it's them? Sometimes they might not even be in control of that account. It's an intern.
We've done it, we've been blocked. And our point is you've got this social media account. It's in your name as, his favorite is Senator Linda Frump, but anyway, that's another thing.
And then do you try to contact them directly?
But they're using that platform in their official capacity. If it was their personal account, I hear you. That's fair game. You want to block me, block me.
Sure.
But in your official capacity, as a government official, as an elected official, and not in the case of the Senate, but regardless, you shouldn't be able to block any member of the public from criticizing you in that form. And so how do you combat that?
Because what they're doing.
I know there's so many scholars who write about social media use and the way social media can be, it's a quasi new area, like it's a new space, right, that we're entering, that officials would even share their personal opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a new era of the public even having this kind of access to a public official in the first place. So I think, if I'm honest, they don't know. They probably don't even know that they shouldn't be doing that.
No, they know, because I've contacted the Senate Ethics Committee, and I had a long discussion with them over a week. And I finally got her to reverse her Instagram account. So she had to make her Instagram account personal. Because as a public official, she shouldn't be blocking anything.
But that's my point. If you even had that meeting, then it's obviously not something that there's a set standard of knowledge and shared, right? That's what I'm saying. It's like moving parts.
And that's why I'm asking the question. I'm wondering if there is a group out there that is working on this, because I think it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Because what it creates is, like they're sanitizing their social media pages.
Yeah.
They're taking away all the negative comments.
It's definitely a censorship in the digital realm, for sure.
Yes.
Throwing it back to the audience, is there anybody who would like to comment on that?
Well, it just seems, so many companies, companies are very careful about their social media and developing policies. So you would think that Parliament would have a policy around that as well, or the Senate would have a policy around how the public representative social media account should be run as opposed to their individuals.
I don't know. I teach in one of my courses. I had a week where I was talking about public policy. I'm not a policy person, so if you are, please forgive me. But the government always seems 5-10 years out of step with the private sector in terms of just even interacting. Like, think about how if you have a problem with a product and you contact customer service, how they interact with you. Now think what you just said about contacting your member of parliament, or how they interact with you. Clearly there's a difference, right? And so, yeah, these are moving parts, because we're just, like I said in my talk, we're in a different era, in a new era of having to now interact through an intermediary that is technically a private company or publicly listed company. Like, all of this at the end of the day is data that's going somewhere. That's what we're using to interact with our public official. Like, in a way, it already seems kind of problematic that they would even use that now as a means to get in touch with the public, and that we would then see that as a legitimate means to get in touch with them. It actually already seems like it's fraught for issues.
You have a question?
I have to react there. I'm going to try to make sense. So I agree that it is data, but only for those who are not directly linked to the system. If you are on social assistance, you probably have an anonymous Twitter account. If you have one, I don't have one, right? Because you're constantly afraid of reprisals, and the reprisals come. right? So in that case, it's not only data, it's basically your own life, right? The caseworker can call you and change attitude completely the week after they've known that you had some comment about, your caseworker or something on ODSP, right? So in that sense,
what I'm just saying, we're entering a new era of this, because this is what, in the last 10 years, right? It hasn't been there isn't historical data for this going back 50, 60 years of this kind of thing that you're talking about.
So I think we're not in a new era. We're exactly in the same era, but now things are more complicated and more visible.
Yeah.
And the government has more tools to follow us, right?
I think to link what you're both saying is maybe we're in a new era. There are consequences in the same ways that there's always been.
Yes.
But I think what's interesting is the fact that there are very tangible consequences, especially for people on the margins, when it comes to the virtual realm.
Exactly. One comment could just ruin the entire life.
Exactly.
Yes, it's very true.
Yes, sorry.
However, I do think it's worth mentioning that because all of this is in text form, it can all be recorded, which is very, very, very important. And also that it's kind of interesting if you're looking at this, how because all of these things are so technological, sometimes you have interesting hacks that then reveal information, or you have people who record things that then become different kinds of activism. I wanted also just to raise something else. Is that okay?
Yes, for sure.
I noticed that there's somewhat of a common theme with you and you of, what is it? I think for me, I think I have a similar thing where you want to do something positive for the world with the thing that you do, whether it's your job or, and that's a really powerful thing to be able to actually do that for work, and that becomes really, really difficult in these political times. I would just like to maybe get some commentary on, I'm at that place too, where I'm sort of looking at how could I do something positive for my community and actually make that a thing that fits into my life and my work, and hopefully at some point be self-sustaining. So maybe a few comments on what that is and how that works now, and the pressures that clearly this introduces to that.
Well, I am still working while I'm doing my whole project with Humans of Basic Income, which has become a full-time job, but Photographers Without Borders has not slowed down in the slightest, and the nature of that job just by nature is stressful. And I had to pick up teaching piano again. So I don't enjoy it anymore, which is really unfortunate because I love music and piano, and I feel like, I'm sitting there telling a 5-year-old where middle C is, and in the back of my mind I'm like, I need to email this person, I need to schedule this meeting, I need to take that portrait. Where's middle C? Where's middle C? There's middle C. Play the damn note. And so it is like a process of trying, and I'm in the middle of doing it right now, and trying to fit this into my life and make this my full-time job, because it needs to be, because I'm at capacity as to what I can handle, physically and also emotionally. I need therapy when all of this is over. Like, I've encountered some terrifying stories, and that they give me nightmares now. I think with this, I just sort of realized, I was like, I have a voice and I have an ability to do this, and nobody else is going to do it. So I had to go, and I didn't think about it. I just ran. I just hit the ground running. And I think when it happens, when something like directly affects you, like like part of it was very visceral, like it's my own survival at stake, but it's also me realizing, like, in my work at Photographers Without Borders, we work directly with grassroots frontline communities that are doing the work, because we recognize that they know what their needs are and what their community's needs are, and they know how to respond to those needs. I don't. That's not my community. That's not my job. What I can do is amplify their stories, and I can support them. And so it's like recognizing, I guess, for yourself in your own community, what your needs are and what your community's needs are, and how you as an individual, or you as a group of people and as a community can work on those. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah.
I think that just for the sake of time, Sheila, I think that you might have something to add to the healthy boundary sustainability thing, and then maybe we can continue the rest of the conversation in the workshop.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
I think, yeah.
sorry. Another question? Yes.
I want to thank you, wonderful work that you're doing, very inspiring, everybody. But there's something that I wanted to ask about. All during the protests for what Ford has been doing in the last 6 months and culminating in what happened in the legislature and city council, we kept coming across people, and myself and people who are looking for an actual coalition of different issues all in one coalition, and no one could ever find it. Like the months go by, we're 6 months into this, and if you have access to the media, or if you're a media worker, you can work on the media in your project, and the media then expresses your project. But if you're part of the majority of people who don't even often have a computer that works, the first step is that there be unified live presence, like neighborhood pickets, demonstrations, sources of information where you can just walk to somebody and ask what's going on and what you should be doing. That's called coalition. It's a very ancient form of politics, and it's been absent from the Ontario situation now for months. And people come up because of my age thinking that I know where that's going to be, right? Or that I knew people that I worked with 40 years ago or something like that. And I'm at a loss, going from event to event, and looking for the coalition. I just started handing that out just for a few people to call because I live in this neighborhood, in terms of being a live presence, like an information picket and so on. Because the thing about living in the age of the internet, there's also an illusion when you say something.
Yes. Exactly.
And
yes.
We're all
Very
part
much.
of that illusion.
Absolutely.
And people spend thousands of dollars to make something and forgetting, like a video and so on, that you look at a video on purpose. It's not accidental. You're more apt to see something on television than something, right? Because you do it on purpose. You press a button. You go onto YouTube and then you do it. So that it's a voluntary act. You're looking for it. And where actually there's hundreds of thousands of people. Like if you walk half a mile on your chores, or a mile on your chores in the downtown, you're involved with traffic of thousands of people. It's the biggest city in Canada, So there's a total absence. Always when I'm in a street picket situation, people come up and say, I never saw this before. As if it happened in the ancient past. When as a matter of fact, it's the first tool. Live presence in the neighborhood is the first tool of coalition. So if something could come out, even though I know we're going to break into workshops and so on, if people wanted to share their telephone number or their email, if tonight it could come out a list, not something that I could do. I just did that. I brought that marker and started passing it around, because I wanted a few people to call for the next thing that happened, right? But that's really not the way to go about it. It has to be something like this that has funds and so on, right? Because I'm one of those people who doesn't have resources for anything beyond Sharpies, right? And I just wanted to inject that into the meeting, making a proposal that something concrete of a list of people who actually are looking for a coalition. You don't have to be the coalition, but you can be in the coalition.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I like it. I just wanted to say I brought petitions that if you sign, you can be on TTC Riders list before you leave. But I also I think you're so right that we need to be supporting each other's struggles.
I think we're
exactly.
Also, coalition is among issues.
Yes.
There are 150 issues that should be in the same coalition.
Yeah.
You're saying something that I have been saying to everyone I know for the past year. I've been saying the same thing. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
This was the first time I heard of a meeting of this kind in all these months. No one ever said, when all the town halls were happening and everything, that somebody that you've organized here, it's amazing, because it could be the beginning of a coalition.
Agreed.
And I'm just asking that it be something concrete, because I think you guys are so effective. You're so articulate and effective. It's amazing, Changes anybody you come in contact with, you change their lives.
Oh, God.
for people who are part-time activists and confined to their neighborhoods, right? There has to be a link among all these separate issues.
Yeah.
Because I may never see any of you again, you know? But I should
Although
see...
I am at Ryerson, so you can come to Ryerson.
No, but that's not how it works. Like people go back into their schedules.
No, you're right, I know.
And this is what the workshops are for. So, what we're
Workshop
gonna
time.
do is,
One more comment.
oh, yes, for sure.
It doesn't work. When we leave here, I just want to point out that we do have good, I'm thanking all of you, wonderful, I'm so excited about this stuff, as what was just said. And I would love to, I have a disability, so just bear with me. We have to know what it is the next thing is. We cannot just meet and leave. We need to know what the next thing is, which I think ties into what you're saying. And Friday is another opportunity. I think there's 23 organizations signed up for this thing. Does anybody not know what Friday is?
No.
Friday is, there's a fascist coming to the monk.
Yep, I know, yep, that guy.
You don't need to know. And I expect,
Fuck that guy.
I expect Antifa and I expect, and the alt to that, to be there. And there will be, you know, another opportunity to coalesce, to combine forces. And I would like to go back into the Parliament of Ontario for just a second. When we sat out there all night long, when Ford was deciding about 45-27, make no mistake, he makes decisions without any consultation on his own, you know, within his own family, everywhere. Doesn't matter. But we sat out there, and then 2 weeks later we went back. Each and every time we go, we are refused entry. This is what's troubling to me, is that we're electing people who are refusing us access to the only voice we have. I mean, legal voice. So we go there, that's our home, that's our house, that's our voice. And we're being shut down, and we're being shut down hard, like smaller spaces to do our work in. We need to expand our space. So I don't know who's going to talk about stuff about who's doing what and how.
Yeah, so we
find that
have
really interesting.
what I believe are 4 different workshops that are...
I'll explain them.
Okay,
Hi.
so John will explain them. That being said, thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you to Marussia. Sorry if I haven't done the best job as a moderator because we've gone over time, but here's John.
Hi, I'm John. I'm one of the other organizers. Thank you all for coming, and this is a really vibrant room, and I'm really pleased that everybody's here and is so engaged. And what the plan was is we were going to do kind of 3 workshops. Claude was going to lead one on letter writing and contributing to his letter writing campaign. Jessie is going to do something with if you want to contribute to her campaign.
Yes, if you want to have your portrait taken, I got Bristol Board.
And the third one was, the idea was that we were going to have 3 of our studio working group members, Grace, Kala, and Mira, kind of give you an overview on how to use this little device better, use your social media, photography, and audio better in your activist work. That being said, you have about half an hour. I want you to use the time the best way you think it is. And so if you go hang out with Kala and Mira to learn about how to use social media, but would much rather spend that time building the grassroots efforts to start a coalition, I encourage you to do that. We'll come back here at 9:20 and kind of regroup and think about where we can keep going from that, because the whole point here is to do this, is to move forward, is to stop meeting and to start acting. So I'm going to suggest that Claude's workshop meets in here. I just saw him, there he is. And Jessie and